There are far worse things awaiting men than death.
What's up, my wizards? Dev from SBMTG channel down there on the youtube.com. So we do decks and stuff. Here's a budget one. Everybody likes budget decks, right? And everybody wanted me to do mono black sack. I gave you a few options the last couple of videos. Mono black sacrifice definitely won in just the last couple of comment sections. And we can build it on a budget, but there are some non-budget options that can make the deck fairly powerful. So I'm going to give you the budget build here, and then at the end I'm going to tell you about some upgrades. Well, the first two cards you got to talk about with this deck and a couple of other decks in the format are Zulaport Cutthroat and Nantuko Hust, right? You got to get that out of the way. Everybody knows by now that this is sort of the engine in the format for if you're wanting to sacrifice creatures and get some sort of value out of it, you know. Zulaport Cutthroat can win the game. Nantuko Hust can win the game by getting huge. You know, it's a little different. Sometimes Zulaport will win the game over the course of a few turns, and sometimes Nantuko Hust can win the game all at one time, and they work obviously really well in tandem. That's why we're doing this in the first place. So, gotta talk about these guys first. That's pretty much a given. Well, we've talked about the engine, so just keep those two cards in mind as we talk about pretty much every single other card that we're going to talk about in this deck. The first thing that I want to talk about, the thing that probably works best, at least in this deck, with this concept is Relentless Dead, which we're going to play a whole 4 of here. And I know that's like $24, which is all the money I'm going to ask you to spend in the deck. The deck's going to cost anywhere between $30 or $35, so this is a large percentage of that. But it's totally worth it. You know, it doesn't quite slot into green-black aristocrats because it's a little too black mana intensive. But perfect for a mono black deck, right? It's exactly up its alley. And this creates one of 2 creatures, actually, that creates a loop with Nantuko Hust and Zulaport Cutthroat. You know, you're getting at least 1 Zulaport Cutthroat trigger every turn. If you can sack this to Nantuko Hust and pop it back to your hand. Not only that, but when you sacrifice it, you have the option not only of popping it back to your hand, but getting a zombie back from your graveyard onto the battlefield, which we have a couple of important zombies in the deck that we can do that with. So, just key card in the deck, and I wanted to talk about it right after the 2 most important cards in the deck, because it's so supplemental. On to some other important stuff. We're actually playing 2 different 1-drop creatures in this deck. You know, I think there are actually a couple of good, at least for the budget deck, creatures in this format. One of them being Shambling Goblin. Shambling Goblin, really good. Again, with Relentless Dead, you can return it to the battlefield. Not bad. You can then sacrifice an Nantuko Hust and give one of their creatures neg1. So a good loop there. You know, there's a couple of cool things you can do with Shambling Goblin in the deck. And it's really good against tokens, which are a big deal right now in the format. Green-white tokens maybe being one of the best decks. So really fantastic against tokens. I like that. And Hangerback Walker tokens, that's important as well. Zulaport Cutthroats on the opposing team. You know, there's a lot of different things that a Shambling Goblin can take out. Actually, you'd be surprised right now. And the other 1-drop that I want to talk about is definitely Sanitarium Skeleton. This is another sort of Relentless Dead-esque card. You know, it creates a loop with Zulaport Cutthroat and Nantuko Hust, which can sort of, you know, if you can hold up your defense, grind you out the game over the course of a few turns. You know, especially if you have more than 1 Zulaport Cutthroat out, things get crazy and you're gaining life the whole time, keeping you in the game. You've got him as a chump blocker. You've got Relentless Dead as chump blocker. So really, if we have a lot of help in grinding the game out as long as we can hold down the ground with these chump blockers and keep getting triggers off of Zulaport Cutthroat. In the budget deck, we're playing 4 copies of Carrier Thrall, and this is a fairly flexible slot if you've got more expensive cards. But I've always liked Carrier Thrall, you know. There's a couple of things you can do with this. It's +4/+4 potentially for an Nantuko Hust. That's cool. It can also help get us to, you know, 4 and 5 drops that we don't quite have the mana to do that. Just, you know, 2 sacrifices is good off of 1 creature, and it's pretty cost effective. 2 power, 2 mana that will actually lead to 3 power in the long run. So I like a lot of good things about Carrier Thrall. Just one of the more sacrificable creatures in the format. We're playing a full play set of Fleshbag Marauder in the deck because it's seriously one of my favorite cards in a deck like this. I played it in Blue-Black Zombies a month or so back, loved it in that. And I played it in Black-White Sacrifice like 3 months back. I loved it in that. It's really good specifically with Relentless Dead. There's a cool loop we can do that's fairly mana intensive, but we're getting really grindy. We're trying to go into the later turns and we'll get our land drops. So this does happen an awful lot. With Relentless Dead, you'll either lose it in combat or you'll sacrifice it to an Nantuko Hust. You go ahead and pay the black mana, pop Relentless Dead back to your hand. You can also pay 3 generic mana, or 3, in this deck it's going to be 3 black, and return the Fleshbag Marauder from the graveyard into play. At that point, you can sacrifice Fleshbag Marauder to its own trigger. Your opponent will still have to sacrifice the creature. Fleshbag goes back to your graveyard. You'll play Relentless Dead again, and you can just do this over and over. You know, play Relentless Dead again, sack an Nantuko Hust, put Fleshbag Marauder back into play. They sack a guy. You can essentially grind them down to no creatures if you have enough turns doing it. We're gaining some life in this deck through Zulaport Cutthroat. We have chump blockers that are very, very reliable. The situation I just explained, this combo, works with chump blocking. You know, just chump block with your Relentless Dead and go from there, you know. So really, we're grinding out a lot, and we can grind down their creatures pretty effectively with this trick. And Fleshbag Marauder is just good on its own, too. I'm playing 3 copies of Smothering Abomination in the deck. Fantastic substitute if you don't have a 4-mana card like Kalidas, for instance. Kalidas costs like $30 right now. This like 25-30 cents. Good price differential on that. And it's still going to let us, you know, sacrifice creatures, and in this case we get advantage for doing so. We have creatures like Relentless Dead and Sanitarium Skeleton that we can essentially sacrifice every single turn. You know, we have Carrier Thrall that'll create 2 sacrifices for this. You know, that's 2 turns satisfied on 1 creature, which isn't bad at all. And it's a 4-power flyer for 4 mana, which is decent stats, you know, at least playable stats. We don't have something like Lightning Strike that's seeing a lot of heavy play right now to make his 3 toughness really a problem, you know. He'll get past a lot of things. He'll get past Ultimate Price. He'll get past Silk Wrap right now. Not bad. He doesn't get past Grass, whatever. But, you know, he can't win them all. But fantastic creature, flying is good, 4 power is nice, and card advantage is good. Especially considering if we have Zulaport Cutthroats out, we're gaining value off of them too. So Abomination works really well, but if you have Kalidas, I'd probably play him instead. That said, Smothering Abomination, not a bad creature at all. The last creature I'll talk about in this deck here is a pretty flexible slot. There's a few things you can do here, but what I've decided to do is a 2 of Priest of the Bloodright, just for shiggles. You know, basically, people do really like this card, by the way. It's not a bad curve topper at 5 mana. It's very, very easy in this deck to get rid of Priest of the Bloodright, and that'll just leave us with a 5/5 flyer that has no real downside at all. Good, because not only is a 5/5 flyer a really strong attacker, and the biggest creature in the deck by far, but we're also kind of crap against flyers. You know, we have like Smothering Abomination that we don't really want to block with and lose, and it would block and die to pretty much it would take some of them out with him, but block and die to most of the important flyers in the format. This not so much, you know, this can block and kill an Avacyn, that's pretty cool. A Thunderbreak Region, which is still sometimes important, and it can trade with an Ojutai, that's cool. There's other things. But really, we have like 0 defense against flyers, so something like this is really good. And again, very strong attacker, and the most important thing here is that the Priest, we don't have to worry about too much. We can sack him very easily and get triggers off of Cutthroat, so that's nice too. Just a really, really good budget option as far as I'm concerned, and there's probably other things you could do in this slot, but if you don't have much money, you could do a lot worse than Priest of the Bloodright. And the last main deck non-land card I'll talk about is a playset of Bone Splinters in the budget deck here. Bone Splinters is just, you know, basically a one-shot Nantuko Hust that'll kill one of their guys unconditionally, you know. We don't have to worry about things like Ultimate Price or Grasp where we have to worry about how big the creature is or what color the creature is. We just kill it outright, unconditionally, which is always really good and indispensable. It's very important. All for just the 1 mana. Kind of sucks at its sorcery speed. I'd really like to do some of the tricks available if this were instant speed, but sorcery speed doesn't hinder it from being, you know, very good. It's still 1 mana unconditional removal that'll help satisfy a condition that we want to sacrificing a creature is good in this deck, so Bone Splinters becomes incredible. 24 lands in the deck, and there's probably stuff you could do here, but really the simplest thing that you could do is what I've done here. 22 Swamp, 2 Rogue's Passage. Rogue's Passage in there. Mostly we're in Nantuko Hust. You know, there's turns where Husk can get absolutely abominably huge. So, you know, an 8/8 or even 12/12 or bigger Nantuko Hust, and you just like tap your Rogue's Passage, pay 4, and get him in there, you know, unconditionally. That's always good in the game, basically. So Rogue's Passage, I think, definitely has a spot, but I don't want to get like too crazy with the mana base other than that. We just want to produce black mana and do it consistently, especially considering something like Relentless Dead costs a lot of black mana to keep working. So we got to have as many swamps as we can get. Here's our fairly simple but very important sideboard right here. You know, a lot of good black cards in the format if you haven't noticed, especially for sideboards. Duress and Transgress, both good against Collected Company decks because they can pluck company. And then Transgress can take a lot of the creatures out of their hand. Transgress can also get Ulamog and Ramp in that deck, Hedron Archive, but mostly you're going to want to get their big creatures out of their hand. Transgress is just a fantastic card. And both can also nail Planeswalkers. All of this is good against control. Planeswalker decks that are scourging the format right now, Collected Company decks. It's just I could see these getting main deck play, definitely, but I'm just trying to get all the synergy out of our sacrifices and all the value out of our sacrifices. So these got relegated to the board, but they're still very, very important against a lot of decks. And probably the weirdest card in the sideboard is Orbs of Warding, but really fantastic against aggro decks. They get a fast start against us. We definitely are consistent and we do what we want to do fairly easily, but it takes us some time to get set up, to be honest with you. So we don't want to get run over, and Orbs of Warding, although it comes out a little bit later, can really help with that. And here are your power rankings, $30, remember that, because it has a final score of 62, which is that's a very cost-effective score, to be honest with you. Again, fairly consistent in what we want to do. We're playing 4-ofs of a lot of cards here, and obviously the engine is consistent and has been proven in Standard Magic, competitive Standard Magic, So the engine is good. We've got a lot of good cards to back it up, and Relentless Dead, and Sanitarium Skeleton's not bad. We got good tricks in Fleshbag Marauder, Shambling Goblin. All of it's, it works together fairly well, and 62 isn't the end of it. There's a lot of good cards that you can upgrade the deck with, but I do have a fair amount of faith in the budget deck here. It's not going to cost you that much money, and all the pieces work fairly well in concert, and a lot of these pieces have already been proven in Standard. But as far as upgrades go, if you did want to spend more money, I'd probably start with Kalitas. I've already mentioned him. Kalitas, very, very good in a deck. Gives us another sacrifice outlet. Helps us out against aggro. Sometimes blanking aggro boards, which can be really good. Can be a huge threat, a little bit later in the game. Everything about Kalitas is good. And again, a proven card in Standard. One of the best cards in Standard right now. So play Kalitas if you possibly can. Liliana would also be an obvious inclusion in this deck, but she's just like $20 right now. We can't do it on this budget, but if you have the Lilianas or you have the money, definitely throw her in there because Liliana's crazy in something like this, probably 2 or 3 of, obviously. Hangerback Walker, obviously good too. He's about $5 or $6 right now, so he's not a huge upgrade, but he definitely goes in probably over something like Carrier Thrall, I would say. But Hangerback is obviously good in this. And then I guess the only other thing I really want to talk about is Languish. We not only profit off of a Languish pretty easily, but we can also get Sanitarium Skeleton back. We can get Relentless Dead back, and we'll still get Zulaport Cutthroat triggers when all of our creatures die. So sometimes a Languish can just be a way to kind of end the game if you don't have a Nantuko Hust out or something, but you do have multiple Zulaports. And it can also be a way to get us into the game so we can start setting up and doing what we want to do after we wipe the board of everything they've done so far. As far as what comes out, all the 1-drops are fairly flexible. Priest of the Bloodrite is an incredibly flexible card. Carrier Thrall, pretty flex. And then Smothering Abomination, I think, is flex if you have Kalitas. A lot of flexible slots in the deck and a lot of important, expensive cards in Standard that can go in. I may have said flexible just then. Anyway, what are we doing next time here on the channel? Well, next time I'm going to do a top 10 list. It's finally time to do the top 10 rares / mythics in Standard, and that's probably going to be controversial because you can't talk about the best rares without somebody being like, well, this rare is good, but there's like 30 amazing rares in Standard right now. So get ready for that. And as far as decks go, a lot of people want to see Green-Blue Investigate. I keep seeing hits on that one, so let me know if you want to see that and any other decks you want to see. I'm working on them. Oh, and Tony reminded me the other day that we were planning on doing Solar Flare. I had picked it up and then decided to wait until Eldritch Moon came out to look at that deck a little harder, but Tony actually has been testing that deck out on X-Mage, and he says he's got a version of it that's really powerful. He related to me the other day, and it does look really good. I'm going to shuffle up a few matches, but just the list looks fantastic. So I want to bring that deck to you guys here too very soon. I'm pretty excited about that. So just stay tuned for all that. Like if you enjoyed this content, and then sub for all the content I've talked about. Comment down there in the thing and do all the other YouTube stuff. I'm Deb from SBMTG. This is Zigby down here. I don't know if you can even see him, but he's down here. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, my wizards.